Tallboys and Trackmasters is brought to you by Expert Exhaust. Expect more for your money. MTB Shock Dock, your choice for suspension needs. High Gear Success. From helping racers get sponsored to motorsports event operation and promotion, shift your passion into high gear. Miracle Works Detailing. No cars too dirty. And by Cycle Mart, your motorcycle parts store.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the New Digs, and also welcome to episode 72 of Tallboys
and Trackmasters.
Oh yeah. Best part of the week, son. Well, sir, I know you have a lot of life stuff going on, so I appreciate you coming over tonight. As you can tell, we got slightly new setup here. Got some more stuff here. We're back at my garage. Place we were renting wanted to raise the rent up twice as much, and we constantly had internet issues over there. Honestly,
Yeah,
it was a little bit frustrating. So decided to tone things back a little bit. Come back home.
Get back to our roots.
Get back to our roots. I like that.
Yeah.
And this little setup here will be slightly temporary until you have some things coming up. We'll be going back to separate streaming.
Yep. So my wife and I are finally getting a house.
Where's
So
the
we'll
house?
be far enough away that it's not really going to be feasible to do episodes in person all the time.
Yeah.
I still like to do them occasionally,
Yeah.
but
I'm sure there'll be.
on weeknights and whatnot, probably just go back to casting from two different locations.
Yeah, and that's it happens. It's changes that are positive. And I'm proud of you guys. Excited for you guys. Be
Yep.
great.
I'm thrilled. Going to have a pretty sweet shop by the time it's said and done. Nice place to work on stuff.
And you're right along some epic dual sport routes already. So
Yes.
excited
Yes.
about that.
I can be 10 minutes from Blue Hole and
Yeah.
all that area.
Yeah.
Could be close to Sand Springs too if they hadn't closed that bridge, but
Well, typical West Virginia DOH.
happens.
Well, we had a lot of industry news kind of drop here recently, and that's why tonight's episode is titled Newsflash. And honestly, this entire show is going to be an industry news segment. So let's cue the music. All right, son. First up, and probably the biggest news, we got the EICMA recap. So
It's crazy. I couldn't keep up with all of it.
I know, we constantly send each other news articles throughout the week, and our chats were blowing up between each other. It's like every single time you turn around, there was some new bike dropping, some new information dropping, and it's very pertinent to what we do in our discipline here. So we definitely want to sit down and discuss all these cool new bikes that are coming out. And honestly, probably the thing that absolutely stole the show and what's going to affect us the most is the new DRZ 400, or let me rephrase that, the DRZ 4S, right? That's what they're calling this now. So take a look at it here. Completely redesigned, all except parts of the engine itself are similar to the old school
Yeah,
DRZ.
the engine architecture and main design remain mostly the same. They did make some chassis tweaks out of necessity for fitting in the EFI throttle body.
Yeah, one of those I know was they're going to a twin spar frame now. It's not a single neck frame like
Yep,
the old
yep.
DRZs.
Yeah, which was it's pretty normal twin spar frames. Like my KLX is a twin spar frame for packaging purposes, but everybody for years talked about wanting a new DRZ, and one of the big desires for a redesign was that we would finally get a sixth gear.
Did that happen?
No, it was too good. We weren't allowed to have it.
Yeah.
They do claim to have improved the gear ratios to give a little bit better spread. I was really hoping that they would throw in a sixth gear, but you know, people who aren't engineers don't always understand that sometimes there's reasons things are the way they are. I mean, it could be as simple as we can't add a sixth gear without, changing the overall packaging of the transmission, and that's going to warrant like more frame changes and this, that, and the other. So hopefully the change in gear ratios will make up for the lack of a sixth gear. But I mean, modernized EFI for better or worse, same route as the KLR, even gained weight the same way the KLR did.
Yep.
Not a huge amount. I don't know if you know the
it's roughly the first estimates put it at about 338 340 pounds, so it's about give or take 8 or 9 pounds heavier than the old DRZ.
Yep.
You brought up a good point. I kind of think that this is the same path that the new gen KLR has taken. It was the company's way to do a refresh enough to get it back into certain market shares, like the Euro 5 regulations in Australia,
New Zealand.
Those places where the DRZ is absolute legend. It's able to be sold again there, and I think that's something that people need to take into consideration when they see this. Obviously, we wanted the sixth gear, we wanted better suspension, we wanted this and that, but Suzuki still honestly is struggling as a manufacturer in all reality. Obviously the V-Strom 800 come out of left field, completely new design.
Yep.
And here you go again. It's just a way for Suzuki to broaden their market share, refresh it to a point where it's still going to attract new riders and give people another option out there. That's the main motif when we have these conversations. Is this day and age, we have more choices and more opportunities to pick something than we ever have in our sport.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah. You think about it. We went and talked to Tom McKee. Pretty much what we would consider to be the worst dual sport in terms of like suspension travel, power, et cetera, et cetera. You go back to the guys that started the Jack Pine and stuff like that. Would have killed for a bike that had 6 inches of suspension travel. That would have been groundbreaking at the time. You really hit the nail on the head. The DRZ being able to come back into Euro markets now that they'll be compliant with the current emission standards is huge. The U.S. is a large market share for Suzuki, but it's not the sole market share.
Right.
So hopefully they don't come out with the Euro N+1 emissions that are even worse.
Yeah.
Let's
take another look at this thing real quick. One thing that I absolutely despise on this bike is the headlight. I think it's the ugliest thing out there right now. It looks tiny. I know it's an LED unit and it probably does put out decent light, but man,
not that the previous gen DRZ headlight was a looker.
Yeah, very old school.
Yep.
But you kind of run down through some of these stats. Obviously EFI, it's ride by wire, so there's no throttle cable in this unit.
Yep.
It does have several different ride modes available. It's also available in a supermoto. That's something that they were definitely going to stick with and not disparage from.
Inverted
forks, which in all honesty are probably not very adjustable, but probably better than the old units were.
More adjustable than a CRF 300L.
I would say so. We'll get into that shortly as well. You can see the styling cues come from the RMZ 4-stroke motocross bikes. It does look better, I feel. And
they got rid of like the really. I know there's probably some hardcore DRZ fanboys in the viewer count. Not to fault the bike, but the aesthetics of it were pretty rough. They were great for the late 90s.
Oh yeah.
But, they had like the big bubbled out side panels and stuff like that, and it just made it look really chunky and and all that.
It appears to have slimmed down. It appears to win on the Slim Fast
When in
program, but
reality-
it hasn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So
yeah,
yeah, there's weight savings. I know you can go back to the image.
Yeah.
So the header pipe is significantly larger. That wasn't for, tuning or anything. There's, a catalyst element in that.
Yep.
So by replacing that, everybody wants to replace the exhaust, this, that, and the other. Throw a lithium battery on there because it likely comes with a flooded lead acid.
Yep.
You can probably shave 10 pounds relatively easily. The seat looks horribly uncomfortable. Not that any dual sport has a really comfortable seat, really,
not really.
but
Well,
I mean, time will tell if they did a good job.
Yep, that's very true. Price estimates, there's not really been a dead concrete MSRP delivered yet, but they're thinking somewhere around $7 grand, $7,100. It's not a bad price, honestly, for that.
Considering that they were charging, was it 7-8 grand for previous gen DRZ 400,
Yeah.
which had been unchanged for a
Right.
very long time.
Right. I think this is going to be another great option, especially at that price point. And you can guarantee that the aftermarket is going to see this and run with this bike. And I guarantee it's going to be a really, really good dual sport and adventure mount for somebody out there.
Yeah, I agree. Especially if they got the gearing right, it would make a really great, more off-road oriented adventure bike.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. We'll stick with it, and any other news drops, we'll be sure to share it. But
Yep.
that was definitely the headliner of the show, so to speak. And up next is another one. You've seen spy photos, rumor shots. You've seen trades, insider people being able to touch it and see it. But this was the first full release and full go around of a bike that I know me and you both are very excited about.
Yep.
And that's the new KTM 390 Adventure and Adventure R. As you can see here, we've got dedicated off-road spoked wheels. We've got some taller WTP suspension. Definitely some aggressive bodywork and styling with the fairing.
They, in my opinion, really knocked it out of the park with aggressive styling.
Yeah, this thing looks the part. It definitely looks the part.
And it has, like you said, spoked wheels, but they're traditional spoked tube style wheels.
Yes.
I know some guys don't like the style of wheel that's tubeless, but the way they achieve that is by having the spokes on the outside of the rim.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
And a lot of those are not adjustable.
Yes.
So once
Which
it loosens
to
up, you're
me
done.
is a complete non-starter. Because if you're riding a lot of rocks, which seems to be a lot of what the state has to offer, you are going to be adjusting and truing your spokes
Mhm.
on a semi-regular basis. Ground clearance, everything looks pretty good. I'm not going to try to speak to the reliability of the engine overall.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. The 390 Duke has been kind of hit or miss, especially the early generations with a lot of electrical issues, throttle issues. I mean, for the most part, it seems like they may have had all that stuff worked out. So we'll just have to see. But I think this is KTM kicking the door down in this new lightweight adventure segment that we're seeing. The CF Moto 450s, the Royal Enfield Himalayans. If this thing comes in at a cheap price point, which we'll see what happens given KTM's recent struggles that we'll talk about here soon.
Yep.
I really do think that this bike, this is what people have wanted. This is when the 390 Adventure came out. This is what they wanted. They didn't want the 390 Duke with a little bit taller suspension and still cast wheels on it.
Yep.
This is what they wanted. So I guess I give KTM props for that. This is a chance for them to listen to their customer base and come out with what they kind of wanted.
Yep. I agree.
I'd be curious to see, in person what the overall size of that thing is, because I know like a regular 390 Adventure's kind of smaller.
bit,
It's
yeah,
for a
it's a little
smaller
bit
statured
squat.
person.
Yep.
So it would be curious to see exactly what the scale is, so to speak, of that bike. But
I think KTM would have the opportunity to improve the affordability of the middleweight adventure bike market. A lot of the middleweight adventure bikes, it's gotten to the same point as buying a midsize versus a full size truck. When the cost difference is so little, you might as well just go whole hog and get a larger adventure bike.
honestly, yeah, if you just like you said with the truck, yeah, the maybe the 7-foot bed is a little bit more expensive, but or maybe even the same price. But at the end
Yep.
of the day, yeah, you might not use it all, but it's nice when you have it.
Yep. And it's a middleweight but off-road capable adventure bike segment. There's a lot of options for middleweight adventure bikes, but the capability is quite spread. Like you look at a Kawasaki versus 300, for instance, versus a Tenere 700.
Hmm.
They're both classed as middleweight adventure bikes.
Right.
There's just a big spread in performance and capability.
Yep. All right. Up next, continue with the theme of lightweight and middleweight adventure bikes. Moto Morini has acquired some design patents and some, shall we say, questionable copyrights to also produce basically the CF Moto 450 under their licensing.
Yeah.
Um, I think as the Chinese motorcycle market continues to aggressively expand, you're going to continue to see things like this. The badge engineering that we see from General Motors, back in the day, you're going to continue to see the same motorcycle offered with different plastic, maybe some slightly upgraded things here or there. But honestly, here in the United States, we haven't seen a whole lot of CF Moto 450s around.
No.
That's kind of a unicorn bike. So Moto Morini has a decent presence here with the Escape 650. It seems to be a pretty popular bike. So this is another avenue for them to try to capture some of that market share. I feel so. It definitely hit a lot of
Yes.
interest there at EICMA.
It's really interesting. Of course, we'll talk more about the growing market share of Chinese manufactured machines later in the episode. But having had a chance to talk to some more veteran riders that were around when everything shifted from like Triumph and BSA towards Japanese bikes. Initially, the Japanese bikes were considered to be a joke in terms of performance and quality, and then once they got their legs under them, uh, there was no
No
real
question.
competition.
Yeah.
You know, like you look at Honda coming out with the Elsinore. I've got the complete history of Hodaka book, and
Mhm.
it pretty much states that was the single greatest nail in the coffin was Honda coming out with a more powerful, cheaper machine.
Right.
So I kind of question: Are we going to witness the similar thing happen with with Chinese bikes this go around that happened with Japanese bikes in the late '60s, early '70s?
Yeah. I think as far as our discipline goes with dual sport and adventure motorcycles, the opportunity is there 1000%
Yep.
for them to take that market share and run with it. Now, I know Cove has some motocross models coming out that are supposedly trying to compete with that. I don't think it's going to be a while in the strict motocross, supercross era and segment that you're going to see Chinese motorcycles make a
Yep.
hard push. That it's not feasible for them right now. But you know, obviously a dual sport or adventure bike has less demand of it, and I think that's what's beneficial to the Chinese
Unless you're
bikes.
riding it.
Unless I'm riding it, yeah,
Unless you're riding it.
yeah. Then you blow slave cylinders out. I got it sitting over here right now, tore apart. So
Brakes just slow you down, buddy.
it'll be all right. It'll be all right. All right. Up next is probably what I was most excited about out of anything that would come out of EICMA, but I hate to use this phrase, but it was kind of a cock tease a little bit, and that was Kawasaki with their
Yeah.
what appears to be everyone's kind of speculating at the moment, but a KLE 500 twin cylinder adventure bike. The reason that we think this is, obviously this is in Italy and Europe, and certain licensures like your A2 license has to be 600 cc's or under. And in order for them to do that, it has to have a brake single front brake disc rotor. So that tells you off the bat that it's not over 650 cc's because anything bigger than that demands it has to
Okay.
have dual front disc. You can see the exhaust sticking down through.
Yep.
There was some side by side shots of the new Ninja 500 engine. Looks almost identical. So what are we seeing here? Well, we kind of feel like it's Kawasaki's answer in their entry into this light adventure bike segment
It's
with some
it's
type of KLE 500.
it's going to be their attempt at a Tenere competitor. We call it the Kenere,
The Kenner.
but it's got very similar overall like front profile, shape, etc. You can see it's got a definitely a rally tower setup.
Yep.
Front forks that seem very similar to the ones that are on the KLX 300, which are pretty decent
Yeah.
forks. I think
Yeah.
they're Showa Kayaba.
Yep.
Less than thrilled about the very exposed radiator
Yeah.
hanging out behind the forks, but you got a low front fender to keep the rocks and whatnot off that. And
I'm sure there'll be guards and stuff out as well in the future, but
yep,
yeah, that's a concern.
it's exciting. After several years of us complaining about how the Japanese manufacturers don't come out with anything new, it seems that they've stepped it up significantly
Yeah.
over the last couple years, and
That's
like we
encouraging to
said,
see.
it really is. I think that it speaks to the growing market share for adventure bikes and things like that. The crazier the world gets, the more people are seeking some peace and solitude outdoors.
Yeah,
So adventure bikes are a great way to get into that.
for sure. Up next, and this is kind of a funny one here anyway. You see this is the new CRF 300L, the Rally, similar bold new graphics, but their big thing this year was stating that they had multiple upgrades on these bikes. So the first thing was some cooling upgrades. I think that it actually comes with a fan now and has a slightly different thermostat housing, supposedly try to help with some of the overheating
I'm
issues.
very shocked it had come with a fan before.
Yeah,
The previous gen CRF came with a cooling fan
yeah.
for its one single side radiator, which I think is a non-starter for a bike that you're going to use out in the trails.
Right.
I know that when Arthur and I would run our 250s around, my KLX had dual radiators with a fan. His had a single side radiator, and his fan would be screaming
Yeah.
long before mine was.
Yep.
So
Their big thing this year also was stating that they had addressed the suspension issues on this bike, correct? So when people started digging into it and they were saying, okay, well, what we got? We got stiffer springs, we got, different rebound and compression adjustments finally because the front's non-adjustable. They said that they, quote, had improved the dampening, end quote. So it's still not adjustable.
we went to a little bit higher viscosity fork
We
oil.
put ATF in the front forks. That's
Yeah.
what we did. The front's still not adjustable. It still only has one spring on one side of the front fork.
Yep.
I don't see how you can claim that this is going to be a major improvement.
The rear, I assume, is preload only,
Yeah.
as was the previous gen CRF.
Yeah.
Anytime somebody talks about wanting to get into, a CRF 300, for instance, I always try to steer them towards Kawasaki's option, simply because the suspension is
Right.
significantly better. Is as good as Olin's or something like that? No, but most of the time, people getting into bikes like these are more novice riders. Uh, you will have far less limitations to your riding style with the adjustability of the Kawasaki suspension
Yep.
versus the CRFs. But at the same time, Honda's goal was to create the most affordable bike, like entry level bike for that segment. Same way what they did with CRF 250L, and they did it. Unfortunately, what you have to do is cut some costs.
Yeah.
You've seen it. I've seen it. Guys will buy CRF 300Ls. They're not thrilled with the overall performance of the suspension, the power, etc. And next thing you know, by the time you've done Olin's, a high compression piston, hot cams, this, that, the other, you've arrived at the price of a KTM 350
Yeah.
EXCF.
Which you probably should have started with anyway, if
I-
you're that serious about it.
I think that if you're going for an enduro bike, that
Yeah.
it's easiest to just start with one.
Yeah.
But I mean, to each their own. So
Yeah, and people continue to buy them, and
Yeah.
aftermarket suspension companies are still making a lot of money off of them. So.
they're not bad bikes. It's
Yeah.
just you have to figure out what you want to do. But unfortunately, getting into the hobby, you don't know what you're going to end up doing all the time.
Yeah.
Like you might envision yourself, you'll be riding a lot of gravel or something like that. So suspension's not paramount. But then you end up getting a taste for like single track or more technical stuff, and you really start to need a little bit better suspension. Uh, Personally, I think at that point, sell the CRF and buy a KTM
Yeah.
or similar,
Yeah.
and you got a more capable platform to start with for probably less money than you would have poured into a CRF trying to make it something that wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, that's something we've definitely talked about too in previous episodes. You reach that threshold where, you know, it's not worth it. You're just throwing money away because no matter how much you put into that bike, it's not going to be, a single track slayer. It's
Yep.
not going to be a Euro style, lightweight, flickable, awesome trail weapon.
Yep.
And when you go to resell it, there's going to be people out there that don't want all that stuff on that bike.
Yeah.
So you're going to lose a lot of money. And, it's your money. You do what you want with it. But we've said it before. I think if you're dedicated to buying a lightweight entry level Japanese dual sport or adventure bike, just go ahead and get the KLX. We've seen zero issues with the one that Tom has.
Yep.
I've personally rode it a bunch. It's a great little trail weapon. Love it.
I have beat on my KLX 250 as my KLX 250 is beat on me, and it's been a great, very reliable bike.
Yeah.
Very good factory suspension for the price point.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, up next, Husky has entered the electric side of dual sport riding. This is Husky's new Pioneer, which is largely based on the KTM Freeride. You're looking at top speed of about 59 miles an hour. Battery life with mixed dual sport riding is claimed to be about 85 miles, which is not bad. I mean,
We're getting there.
you're getting there. That would do some decent riding around here. You could do a lot of good local stuff with that and get back before it was needed to charge. But
Man, if you had a backyard track or something like that,
yeah,
that you didn't want to make a bunch of noise, that would be ideal.
that was one thing when we interviewed Ryan from MXG that really hit home with me about these electric bikes was the noise pollution issue that you have shutting down a lot of these local riding areas or tracks. That's kind of what you see the future of these electric dirt bikes going towards is mitigating that. Giving you the freedom of being able to go out there and enjoy an off-road experience on a motorcycle without the harsh, noise pollution and actually just legit pollution out
Yep.
there. So
Well, I know just myself, I'm not a loud exhaust guy for the most part. I left the exhaust of my KTM factory minus some very basic mods. I like that it's quiet. Um, it's a little bit less fatiguing,
that's
and
true.
I say this as I sit over and look at your full open FMF on your KTM.
Titanium 4.1, son.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I've had my eardrums burst a few times being behind you.
Yeah,
But tell you something else that a bike like that would be fantastic for if you owned, some hunting property or stuff like that.
checking
Man,
some stuff out,
yep, exactly. You
being able
do
to sneak up on the
scouting,
wildlife.
scouting, checking cameras, this, that, and the other. And a big benefit of electric bikes is the traction control on them is very, very impressive because they're not trying to interrupt the ignition curve or anything like that. It is a direct control of how much power that motor is putting to the rear wheel
Right.
with the traction control system.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what comes with this because our next segment we're going to talk about is very directly impacted by
Yep.
the situation that we have coming
This
up
one's
here.
this is going to hurt a little bit.
Yeah, excited to talk about that too.
Me too.
Last but certainly not least, BMW released a concept bike. This is what they're calling the F450 GS, parallel twin, roughly 50 horsepower. Again, entering into that lightweight adventure motorcycle segment. The only thing that I don't like about this bike is the 19-inch front wheel. We'll see if maybe that changes in the future with a full release version. You have to take these concept bikes with a grain of salt.
Yep.
They're kind of put out there. You know, honestly, it's probably a parts bin bike. It's stuff that they had a lot of that they could use off this bike, that bike, whatever, to gauge the public's interest.
Exactly.
And this thing,
Yep.
it really was definitely a huge buzz at the show. So I definitely see BMW going this route. They have the 310 GS, which is a great entry level bike, but in all reality, it suffers a lot. I feel like the 390 Duke does. It's a street bike that they try to put knobby tires on. It's a little small. I don't think it fills a whole lot of roles very well. This thing weighs 330 pounds with over 50 horsepower. I mean, it should haul the mail and do what you need to do fairly well.
Yep, I agree. That tank is gigantic on that thing and is super high on the frame. So while it's comes in at what, 330 or yeah,
338, 339, I think.
it might be like the previous gen DRZ where it just carries the weight really high in the frame and you
Mhm.
start getting a little off camber and it feels like it weighs almost twice what it actually does because the weight's so high in the chassis.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, like I said, well, concept bikes, you got to be careful when you touch on them. I think that there's things out there that you see that may come to the production bike, may not, but I think
But
it's a good sign that BMW's trying something like
you
that.
said it right. It's a means to gauge public interest.
Yeah.
Kind of see what portion of market share they could capture with something like that.
Right. All right, my friend, you ready for the big, huge topic of the evening?
I am.
We've touched on this a lot off camera, me and you, and this has been going on for a long time, and that is KTM's crisis.
Yeah. Pierre Immobility Group. Dad's about to go out for some milk.
So obviously, if you follow us, if you follow, any kind of motorcycle industry news, you saw the press release that PR Mobility Group came out with not long ago. I think it was 3 or 4 days back, basically saying that they have a shortfall of, was it $130 billion? I think it was.
It was a pretty significant amount of money.
Yeah. So they're scrambling, trying to figure out what they're going to do to come up with this shortfall. Now, this has a lot to do with a multitude of factors. So I think it behooves us to go through a timeline of events that kind of led us to this point, and then maybe you can take like a 30,000 feet view above what we see in this situation. So I had to write all this down on the phone here because it's a lot of information, but we'll go through the steps and what's kind of led us to this point where they're having these issues. So 2007, KTM starts having some financial issues. They decide to allow Bajaj Motors of India to purchase a 14% stake in the company. Now, this not only got KTM a lot of capital gains, it also allowed them to enter a new market share into India. And you started seeing a lot of the 390 Duke stuff made there. You started seeing some of the bigger adventure bikes being able to be brought to India and be sold there. So, okay, kind of makes sense from a vantage point here. 2013, KTM buys Husqvarna from BMW. BMW Husky was kind of faltering at the time, and KTM had the opportunity to purchase Husqvarna and bring them to their realm, and that's worked out pretty well, I think, for Husqvarna and for KTM. It gives another opportunity for you to purchase the bike under the same dealer network. Some slight differences, the linkage and the composite subframe, lots stuff like that.
Yeah, we've talked about that in the past.
Yeah. That moves us to 2016. KTM and Chinese company CF Moto form a joint partnership sharing technology and the market shares. KTM owns 51% of that partnership. CF Moto owns 49% of that partnership. Now, same kind of deal. It allowed KTM to enter the Chinese marketplace. It allowed Chinese companies to manufacture certain parts and bikes for KTM at a fraction of the cost it was costing them.
And learn.
Yes.
And we'll come back after James is done with this
Yeah.
This history that allowed the Chinese companies to learn.
Yeah.
And that
you're learning from the best. You're learning from German engineering.
Yep.
So that brings us up to 2018. Now, at this time, as all this is going on, Bajaj has slowly increased their shareholder size into KTM. So 2018, it increases up to 46% into KTM. That's a significant amount of ownership in a company, right? 2019 comes along. Gas parent company Taro Motorsports starts suffering some horrible financial situations, and KTM has the opportunity to buy Gas and forms the Pierre Mobility Group. One thing to note that I don't think a lot of people realize in that situation was while that was going on and the Pierre Mobility Group was being able to be formed, Bajaj was able to increase their stake through some switcheroos, some shareholding swaps, to where they now own 49% of the Pierre Mobility Group.
Yep.
So pay attention to that. That moves us up to 2022. KTM buys 25% of the stake in MV Agusta, who was a failing Italian adventure bike segment. That brings us up to 2023. KTM decides to cut 300 jobs at their Madagoffen factory and decide to move some of their productions to the Chinese holdings with CF Moto. And there was a lot of backlash over that. All these bikes are going to all be made in China now. They're not going to be worth a damn. There's a lot of things that went into that. You had post-COVID with a lot of manufacturing issues, a lot of parts supply issues. That's when you started seeing a lot of the KTM TPI bikes with Kymco cylinders on them, right?
Yep.
We shared that on the show. That brings us up to 2024. KTM at the start of the year buys the remaining majority stake of MV Agusta, so they own them outright now. But they start declaring their shortfalls with a 27% decrease in sales in their first quarter. So this recent press release that they just put out, this is what's going to happen. 1,000 employees at the Madagoffen factory will be furloughed for 2 months starting in 2025. Those employees will be paid $30 for a 30-hour work week for those first 2 months. That's their immediate solution to try to solve their problems. So we'll see, are those jobs ever going to come back? Are they going to come back in the factory? That's one of those deals where it's hard to say. Once things are gone, it's hard to bring them back. And they have also disbanded most of the Husky and Gas race teams. You're not going to have them at Dakar. You're not going to have them in, the World GP stuff. You're not going to have them at GNCC anymore.
Which was KTM's whole, and when I say KTM, I guess in general, I'm talking about the Pierre Mobility Group. Racing was the entire brand.
Right. Ready to race.
The Dakar, exactly.
That's KTM's motto.
The Dakar, various other races, rallies, etc. That was the whole brand. That was a showcase of what kind of bikes they were offering. So what never sat well with me was KTM increasingly producing bikes, engines, etc. offshore and India, China, while presenting themselves as a finely engineered Austrian company. Regardless of your feelings about KTM, you start hearing about things made in like Northern Europe, Austria, Germany, etc. There's a certain level of attention to detail and something like that that you think that you're getting by buying a bike like that. Then we talked about, we got into Kymco cylinders, had some issues. KTM, Pierre Mobility Group, whatever, by producing these engines, these bikes in India, China, etc., they're not doing it for any reason beyond it's a lower production cost.
Mm-hmm.
Bikes have only gotten more expensive. At the end of the day, there is no savings to be passed on to the consumer, but you do get the risk passed on to you, in the event of subpar manufacturing. And again, at the end of the day, it's an investment company. It's an investment conglomerate.
Yes.
The only thing these people care about is as long as that red line goes up, there is no cost too great. For some reason, these investment groups can't foresee long-term consequences of short-term gains. So you get into things like, offshoring your engine production to China. They're learning. They're using you as an opportunity to learn, and now we're starting to see they've learned and improved their manufacturing capabilities to the point, which I've said in previous episodes, it's not that quality things can't be manufactured in China. It's just that quality isn't paramount to their manufacturing process.
Right. Quality control. Too.
Yeah, exactly. Essentially what you've done is found the guy that wanted to shoot you and taught him how to use a gun.
Right.
I mean, that's
yeah.
That's it.
That's a great point, man.
It's something that I saw coming in the back of my mind for some time. maybe not necessarily with India. India doesn't seem entirely yeah, they don't seem like they want to capture a bunch of the US market share. I know they got Royal Enfield and whatnot, but it seems like China's really starting to push hard to capture the US market share for adventure bikes at a
Hmm.
minimum. And the engine's made in the same factory as the KTM engines.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
it's an all around odd situation. Like I said, it's short term pump and dump profits in exchange for what may well be the I don't know how many times KTM has had something like this go on.
Yeah, this isn't the first time this has
No,
happened.
this isn't
That's
first
the important
rodeo.
thing to remember.
I would like to not see Husqvarna change hands for like the fifth time during my time on Earth, but
Poor guys.
but maybe they'll split some assets, do this, do that. Maybe Raiju can buy back the Gas name and produce Gas machines in the Gas factory, so they're not red KTM's anymore. But time will tell. Uh, it's not an ideal situation when you start looking into furloughs, layoffs, jobs being sent overseas. So we'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, my kind of soaring the eagle above the whole situation, looking down. Um, I see this as a very similar situation to General Motors back in '08, '09 in the bankruptcy years. You had, just for example, say you wanted to go buy a midsize SUV, body on frame, four-wheel drive from General Motors. You know
Yep.
what your options were? A Chevy Trailblazer, a GMC Envoy, a Buick Enclave, a Suzu Ascender. Like there's four, and there's a Saab 97X. They own Saab too.
Yep.
Like you had five choices of exactly the same machine. What's differentiating that between anything?
Yep. I agree.
You're making so many different options that you're forgetting that, yeah, people may want that, but the one that you made was fine. The Trailblazer was fine. I didn't need the Isuzu Ascender, the Buick Enclave, that type of thing. And I kind of feel that's the same way with KTM. It's by the time they bought gas, you go to buy a 350, you're kind of confused. It's okay. Well, I know, okay, the gas is $1,000 cheaper. It's a little more bare bones than the KTM, but the KTM's kind of middle of the road. The Husky's supposed to be the high end.
Yeah.
It's confusing for the consumer at the end of the day. And look what happened to General Motors. They shuttered all those companies that they owned,
Yep.
and focused on the key demographics that they had. They got rid of the Suzu, Saab, Saturn, Oldsmobile, Pontiac. That
Pontiac,
they all went to the wayside.
RIP Aztec.
Yeah.
Um,
So I feel like we're seeing a similar situation where they aggressively expanded so fast that I don't think they thought that they thought the market was there for all these different models, submodels, and availability,
Yep.
but it's really not. You're just kind of scattering your customer base out a little bit more. Not to mention with all the issues we've been having with the 790 and 890 cam failures here too, and their response to that, which wasn't very well orchestrated
No,
either.
that's another contributing factor for um I don't want to call it a downfall, downgrade. I don't know. Uh so for some period of time KTMs were seen as, buckets of bolts, and they came back, they improved things like the older RFS motors that
Hmm.
were very, very reliable engines. And then it was kind of a slump in reliability again. And then, late 2000 teens, early 2020s, things started to improve again. And, now with some cost cutting measures and this, that, and the other, it's kind of starting to go back into a slump, and consumer confidence in the brand is really starting to slip. I will tell you what, if I'm spending, what's one of those bikes new, 14 grand?
14, 15
Yeah,
grand.
it,
Yeah.
it better be perfect.
Yeah.
I I won't mince words. It better be perfect. I expect, I'll do the maintenance. I know they require maintenance. That's fine, but I expect good service out of a machine that I spent that much money on. And for riders that are having camshaft issues, which I believe is an issue born from inadequate lubrication as a result of your oil galleys not being cross-drilled properly. But I would never buy a KTM again if they told me to go pound sand.
It's basically what they told their guys. Isn't
they've got instances of camshafts that have visible material missing from the cam lobes that
at low
the
mileage.
dealers, which let's get this straight too, just because you take it to a dealer doesn't mean you've taken it to somebody that knows what they're doing. They're looking at cam lobes that are visibly disfigured, saying that it's just discoloration.
No.
Well, yeah, it is discoloration. It turned blue because it was so hot from a lack of lubrication that it shaved 2 millimeters of material off of it. They're just not in a good spot. You can weather a storm if your consumer confidence is good. Consumer confidence is slipping too, and adventure bike guys are a huge share of the market right now. I would say every bit as big as enduro bike guys by
Right.
this point. So you're putting yourself in a position to where these Chinese companies are going to eat your lunch. If they're putting out an equivalent bike for significantly less money, yeah, it might only last 60% as long as, somebody would
Well,
think a Euro bike would.
yeah.
But
You might be going in knowing there's going to be issues and problems,
yeah,
but you're going to have the same issues and problems with a bike that's $6,000, $7,000 as compared to $15,000. You know, if I was in that case, that's what I'd be doing.
yep, I agree.
And it's something you mentioned earlier too, which is 1,000% correct as well. We have when you get these investment firms controlling the dictating the company, the sport, you're losing that drive and passion that you have from these small startup guys.
Yep.
John Penton was the guy that took it upon himself to make KTM what it is
Yep.
today.
You look at
you lost that.
Cove,
Yeah, Cove.
not currently, but in the not so distant past, their owner, operator, what have you, was an enthusiast.
Yes.
These guys calling the shots for KTM, Husqvarna, and Gas have spent too much time wearing Louis Vuitton dress shoes and not enough time wearing Alpine Star Tech 7s and Tech 10s. I would argue that a lot of these guys that are calling the shots have never thrown a leg over a bike in their life. They just see it as an investment opportunity.
Yeah.
And that is a great way to drive an enthusiast-driven market into the dirt. There's a
100% correct.
reason why these Japanese manufacturers haven't gone this route of trying to acquire other brands. They're not stupid. They're not. You could argue they're risk adverse to an extent, but they can recognize, like what you're talking about with GM, having too many options for machines that are all owned by the same parent company. You're
Mhm.
almost competing against yourself.
Well, and we talked about that in our brand engineering, our badge engineering episode. Well, it's been a while ago now, but
Yeah.
Kawasaki and Suzuki tried this once before. Obviously they were sharing ideas, sharing bikes.
Yeah, like the KLX,
The 400,
yeah,
which was a
KLX
DRZ,
400. Yep.
and it didn't work out. And they found out very quickly it didn't work out, and then you
Yep.
could only get those for a couple of model years before they went out the window. So I just feel like there's an identity crisis there a little bit whenever you offer the same product at basically the same price with different colors or different badges or
Yep.
slightly different things here and there. I just don't think it works.
I feel like the I feel like they acquired Gas, for instance, and then after the fact figured out what they were going to do with it.
Mhm.
And it was originally pitched as like, oh, it's going to be the lower spec KTM. So that would typically command a cheaper price tag.
But it really
The
didn't.
price spread really isn't that significant.
Yeah. Now, if it
So
was $5,000, if it was a $5,000 KTM, yeah,
even if it
hats
was
off.
$3,000,
Yeah,
but it's just not that much of a price spread. So what is the purpose of owning Gas? Because typically anybody that is going to scrape together, what do they go for now? 10, 10, 11, something like that. What's another grand to step up to the flagship KTM, for instance?
Yes.
I don't know what their intention for that brand was, but it's not, it's
I,
just not panning out.
yeah, I don't think it's worked out how they wanted it to.
No.
It's one thing to wave the flag around and say, "Hey, looky here, all three of our bike companies are winning the overall at all these off-road events and stuff." Well, that's great, but you could have done that with just the one.
Yeah.
So
It's odd too to see like KTM, Gas, and Husqvarna all competing in the same rally. It's
Right.
like guys are all on the same bike.
I'm pretty sure if one motor blows up, you can go to that trailer and pick up
Yep.
another one there
Yep.
for it. Yeah. So I think obviously we've kind of laid out everything. We've said our piece about it. Where do we see this going in the future? My thought process to this is I don't think this furloughing 1,000 people and trying to restructure some stuff is going to save it. I think what you're going to end up seeing is more than likely some kind of partnership between Bajaj and CF Moto
Yep.
owning the majority stake in KTM and PR Mobility Group.
I see it going in pretty much the same direction, except they're still going to be doing so behind the mask of like Austrian production quality.
Yeah.
That's like at the end of the day, that's what bothers me. Just be honest about where it's produced. They're going the route of like late 90s, early 2000s Craftsman.
Yep.
It's all being produced overseas.
But it's Craftsman. It
Yeah,
has
but
Craftsman name on it.
you are relying on the heritage of the brand to carry you along, which I don't think is a good approach.
It's not sustainable.
No, I
It's
don't
not
think so
sustainable at
either.
all. So we'll see what happens. We'll keep you guys up to date with any other news that we get
Yep.
across the news desk, and hopefully they can pull it out somehow.
Yeah.
Don't know how that's.
I'd like for them to. I'm not actively rooting against them.
Yeah.
I am rooting against the whole investment conglomerate, psyche that's developed around this company. But for the brands themselves, I'd like for them to stick around.
As long as I can still get parts for my 2015 500 over here, I'll be satisfied. That's all I care about.
I get that.
All right. Last and certainly not least in our Newsflash episode here, Baja Bests. So the Baja 1000 just wrapped up here just a couple of days ago. And Baja to me is still one of the last vestiges of hope when it comes to the everyman,
Yep.
the poor guy succeeding, and just that spirit.
The working class guy.
And it's truly such an epic thing.
Yep.
So, we could sit here and talk about the fact that SLR Honda, kudos to them. They've knocked it out of the park again, winning the overall in the motorcycle world. They have for years, kind of continuing that heritage of Team Honda, Rod Red, JCR Honda, kind of still doing the same thing down there. But to me, whenever you see pictures of guys on an old Triumph with knobbies out there with a backpack where he knows he's probably going to break down and he needs to camp.
There's some really cool setups for Baja, and that's like you were talking about. It's one of the last race series where you can really get weird with it. So I went out a couple of years ago to Vegas. I can't remember. It was a Mint 400. That's another
Mint 400,
one.
Yeah.
They had some Harleys of all bikes. They had the twin shock rears, knobbies, and like Showa and Kayaba front ends that they grafted onto these things. It's just like a really cool, oddball setup, but apparently it works because enough guys were running them that it couldn't just be for aesthetics alone. But
the one thing I love about Baja is the community. So it doesn't matter if you're a factory Honda rider, you're the guy on a Harley that showed up and decided to race. Every single person there, every team that's there, if they have the ability, they're going to do everything in their power to keep you going, cheer you on. That's a transitive form of racing that just no other series captures.
Yep. I agree. That level of camaraderie.
Yeah. You don't see that anywhere else.
I get a little bit fatigued watching like Dakar. It's like, yeah, KTM won again. Like, I would hope as much money as they threw at it that they'd manage to win. That level of support, the riders, et cetera, guys that train to ride that all year.
Right.
I would hope that they could eke out the win. But, the guy we're about to talk about with Baja is a complete legend. I mean, just a complete everyman class competitor.
This guy is such a legend that he won a Horizon Award
Yeah.
for this,
Yep.
for this effort, right? And that's the Flying Dutchman, or Wouter Jan Vidic. So let's, I got a picture of him here. For those of you who may not be familiar or may have not seen an episode that we did previously last year on this guy. So this dude, he's a Netherlands national living in Australia. He talks to a friend of his, I believe the guy's name was Shannon Moss, convinces him to go and race the Baja 1000. Okay. So what's he do? He flies to California. He buys a 2015 KTM 500 EXC, which is the exact same bike I have. He gets on it, rides to San Felipe across the border, gets to the start of the Baja 1000, begs, borrows, and steals some new tires.
Yep.
Figures out the subframe is busted and cracked on the thing. When they get there, he finds somebody that can TIG weld for him. Again, that collective effort to keep the spirit going. He races the Pro Ironman class and gets 7th out of 9. No pre-running. Had no time to pre-run the course like anybody.
Yep.
Had no support crew whatsoever. He was just basically beg, borrowing, and stealing gas, or
complete cowboy approach.
just total. I'm doing this. This is what I'm going to do. And ended up finishing, obviously in time, and finished very well. All things considered, even if you had a factory chase truck, helicopters, all the support, finishing 7th and actually finishing before the time cutoff in the Pro Ironman class is insane.
Yep.
But to do it the way this guy did it completely embodies everything that Baja stands for. So this year, he followed that up, had a little bit more support this year, was able to get 5th place in the Pro Ironman class. But having said that, when he got back to California, the bike was left at his friend's house there and was basically untouched until about 2 weeks ago, where he was able to show up, get the thing kind of back up to snuff a little bit. Had a little bit more support, like I said, but still, that Baja spirit just lives on, and it's absolutely amazing. And I would highly suggest to everyone listening, if you want to know more about this kid's story, there's an excellent podcast called Gypsy's Tale Podcast.
Yep.
They did a sit-down interview with this guy. It's fantastic. You guys have to watch that. Well, we had something similar this year with an oddball, weird situation come up. So there was a young man whose father completed the Baja. What was it? It's almost 10 years ago. And he said, and I quote on the podium, that he was able to do this because his kids were stupid and they weren't going to be able to go to college anyway.
Yeah, so he was utilizing their college funds.
Yeah,
That's what he said, at least.
to
I'm
go
pretty
and
sure
race the
that's
Baja.
hyperbolized, but it was a really interesting quote, because the reporter was really taken aback when he said that.
So this is Ben Hunter and his brother David. They completed the race on a Sherco 450 in 31 hours and 30 minutes, same in the Pro Ironman or the Pro Team class. Now, for those of you who don't know, Ben Hunter actually has type 1 diabetes. And if you can see in the picture right here, the only reason that he was allowed to race this race was if his parents could be live streaming on the bike with him at all times in case there was an emergency. That's a valid concern. Type 1 diabetes is not a good thing. You have to maintain your blood sugar and what have you. So for those of you watching at home, you can see here what this kid had was a Starlink unit duct taped to the top of his helmet.
We're not exaggerating.
This is
literally
literally
just held on with duct tape.
Duct tape. He has a Jackery battery pack duct taped to the back of the bike.
Which that is a testament to the strength of a Sherco subframe. Those people think those Jackery batteries are light. No, it's pretty much a deep cycle boat battery with a handle on top.
They are heavy.
Heavy.
He had his phone mounted to his chest protector. Yep. So his parents literally live streamed him the race, or he's live streamed him the entire time. And the funny thing that I thought was when he come across the finish line, you could see his mom and dad on his chest there still. And the reporter's like, "He did it, Mom and Dad. He finished." So I mean, those stories like that, they're countless, and that's why the Baja continues to be what it is.
That's to me, the spirit of the hobby.
Yes.
You watch some old school content from like the 70s through the 90s, especially like the start of enduro riding in the US back in the 70s. Um, the overall image and vibe was completely different. So stories like that, I think, get us closer to what it was supposed to be. A little bit less commercialized, a little bit more, approachable. If you're crazy enough to do it, that you can go do it, type thing.
That's one thing that I do appreciate about Jed and Backroads of Appalachia doing these 24-hour events is you see that in smaller doses, but it's right here locally. You get to see that firsthand as well. And they just released their 2025 schedule.
It was
excited
cool
about
to
that.
listen to Chris Alls talk about that.
Yeah.
Like, probably not going to get to go race one of these big circuits or whatever, but there's something quite similar to it in my home state.
Yep.
And, I think that's something great to offer.
Like you said, you had bike guys helping side by side guys helping Jeep guys. That community all gets together and does a good thing with each other. We had a couple of comments here. Let's go through them here. Uncle Fred says, "Congratulations, Trevor, on the new the."
Thanks, buddy.
Casa.
You'll have to come see us sometime.
And we have one from Mr. Brian Holmes, who I see randomly was back on Facebook there the other day. Hi,
Nice.
Brian. How you doing, buddy? Remember, KTM is outsourcing manufacturing to China. You can bet their technology will get leaked to Chinese manufacturers. Yeah, we're already seeing that happen, man.
And a lot of times it's baked into the manufacturing contract agreements.
See,
yes, we will produce this for you for X number of years. Thereafter, the intellectual property becomes ours. Yep. Although I wouldn't necessarily trust them to wait until the terms of that contract are met before they start producing based off your IP. But to me, it's a risk. It's a known risk to have something manufactured in China, given their history of IP theft and
no copyright laws or anything like that. All right, that's going to bring it up to the last segment of the show, and everyone's favorite, had to lay her down.
Did you run into some clippings? Did Barb take the kids? Well, Hoss, maybe you had to lay her down.
All right, here we go. There's 3 quick clips from Dirt Bikes Are Fun 11. If you guys want more from him, make sure you subscribe.
These are 3 of the funniest dirt bike clips ever. And at number 3... At number 2...
Jesus, take the rest off.
At number 1...
That was really close.
These are 3
of the worst possible ways you can land off a jump like that, where you land and your bike straight up and down. The suspension absorbs nothing because it can't, and the rider just like rockets straight down into the ground on his butt.
You tend to do what's called a scorpion. Your spine bends completely back like that.
Not good.
Speaking of which, I need that. I threw my back out trying to get the kid out of the car earlier today.
Oh boy,
I'm getting old.
You are getting old.
I race the vet class now, son.
Good thing that won't happen to me.
Oh, yeah, it's coming. It's coming. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us tonight. We appreciate everyone tuning in. Hope you all have a good Thanksgiving next week. If you're hunters, hope you guys tag a big one next week. We got some more stuff coming down the pike, and we'll let you know as soon as it does. So we thank you guys again for tuning in to another episode of Tallboys
and Trackmasters. Thanks,
we'll see you guys next time.